We are live.
Yay! It is Friday. Sorry about Wednesday. The wife had to work overnight. I don't know if it was a spider or a gnat. Either way, it's dead. She had to work overnight doing an inventory, so the bedroom man wall was taken away from me. So
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, as you know, I have my own entertainment going on right next to me here.
That's okay. I'd rather it be a dog than a spider. I can't stand spiders. So before we get started, let me show the beautiful
Oh, very nice.
banner that Charles, the heir of Highgarden, had sent me.
That is very
And
nice.
I
Very
know
impressive.
I told him that a simple nail or regular hook is not worthy to hold that banner up. So I have to go to Home Depot and find a worthy hook that looks good enough to hold the banner up before I'll actually put it on the wall. But again, thank you, Charles. It is absolutely beautiful. So I got it yesterday. I was so happy.
Lady Thistle says, waving from that hole in the stables by the God's eye. Okay,
Is she talking about in the books?
I guess. Is there a hole?
I don't know.
Somebody crashed through there or something?
I
Anyway,
have no idea. All right.
I
Well,
don't
we'll
remember
start with the brains of the operation, which is Richard. He will say what he saw in the chapter, and then I'll jump into my stupid stuff. So take it
thank
away,
you, sir.
Richard.
Thank you, thank you. And the crashes you hear are Sammy and Mia wrestling right near me. Anyway, I probably ought to just turn the camera on them. They'll probably be more entertaining than we are.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
Every time you say Sammy, I think of my cat.
Storm 8, Daenerys 1, but my brothers are dead. Across the still blue water came the slow, steady beat of drums and the soft swish of oars from the galleys. I'm never not talking about the books. The great cog groaned in their wake. The heavy lines stretched taut between. Valerian's sails hung limp, drooping forlorn from the masts. Yet even so, as she stood upon the forecastle, watching her dragons chase each other across a cloudless blue sky, Daenerys Targaryen was as happy as she could ever remember being. Her Dothraki called the sea the poison water, distrusting any liquid that their horses could not drink.
Hey,
On the day, yep.
Again, the wind is playing a part in the story.
Yep.
The lack of wind this time, which I mean, it could be
right. We certainly have reason to believe that the gods might have some impact on the wind, and therefore,
yeah.
Yeah. On the day the three ships had lifted anchor at Karth, you would have thought they were sailing to hell instead of Pentos. Her brave young blood riders had stared off at the dwindling coastline with huge white eyes, each of the three determined to show no fear before the other two, while her handmaids, Iri and Jiqui, clutched the rail desperately and rushed over the side at every little swell. The rest of Dany's tiny Khalasar remained below decks, preferring the company of their nervous horses to the terrifying landless world about the ships. When a sudden squall had enveloped them 6 days into the voyage, she heard them through the hatches, the horses kicking and screaming, the riders praying in thin, quavery voices each time Valerian heaved or swayed. No squall could frighten Dany, though. Daenerys Stormborn, she was called, for she had come howling into the world on distant Dragonstone, as the greatest storm in the memory of Westeros howled outside. A storm so fierce that it ripped gargoyles from the castle walls and smashed her father's fleet to kindling. So the show specifically had Tyrion remember this, but it seems unlikely this occurred in the books.
Yeah.
The only storm outside of what Dany has been told that any character thinks of in the past, at least in the first book, is Ned referring to the Tower of Joy in Eddard 10. A storm of rose petals blew across a blood-streaked sky, as blue as the eyes of death. See Triplet Targaryens, episode 4. Pretty much anytime we're talking about Dany, we're going to say that. Anyway.
Yeah. Which we think that's the storm that she was born in. So.
Yeah, I think that's the reference, right? I mean, there's no other. I don't see any other storm referred to by anybody else that it could refer to, but Anyway,
No, I mean we're only told about the storm god bashing storms in over and over and over again, but that's like way in the past. I mean, for recent history, no.
right. Yeah, and not to mention it doesn't actually make any sense because we know that the fleet was there trying to, Stannis is being blamed for not stopping her, that she in fact took a ship, right? I mean, there's some inconsistencies in the story. There's nothing about any of the gargoyles being knocked off of Dragonstone or any of that.
Yeah.
There's just no evidence that this is actually accurate. That I don't know why. That's one thing I don't even have much of a theory about is why did they tell her that there was this storm there when that can be so easily disproven. That's one thing I don't understand. Or is it that wherever she was there? Well, I mean, we know that there was the storm of Tower Joy, I suppose, but I don't know. I don't know why that's. I don't know why she's been told this, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's hard to even speculate why she's been told this. The narrow sea was often stormy, and Dany had crossed it half 100 times as a girl, running from one free city to the next, half a step ahead of the usurper's hired knives. She loved the sea. She liked the sharp, salty smell of the air, and the vastness of horizons bounded only by a vault of azure sky above. It made her feel small, but free as well. She liked the dolphins that sometimes swam along beside Balerion, slicing through the waves like silvery spears, and the flying fish they glimpsed now and again. Mia kind of behaves like a dolphin or a flying fish. She likes to leap through the water. She even liked the sailors with all their songs and stories. Once on a voyage to Braavos, as she'd watched the crew wrestle down a great green sail in a rising gale, she had even thought how fine it would be to be a sailor. When she told her brother, Viserys had twisted her hair until she cried. "You are blood of the dragon," he had screamed at her. "A dragon, not some smelly fish." So she has a memory of going to Braavos, even though she thinks that her earliest memories are in Braavos.
Yeah.
Mother Royan had an apple cider for breakfast. Okay. Sounds good. He was a fool about that, and so much else, Dany thought. If he'd been wiser and more patient, it would be him sailing west to take the throne that was his by rights. Viserys had been stupid and vicious, she'd come to realize, yet sometimes she missed him all the same. Not the cruel, weak man he had become by the end, but the brother who had sometimes let her creep into his bed, the boy who told her tales of the Seven Kingdoms and talked of how much better their lives would be once he claimed his crown.
Do we think that his insanity was forced upon him, same as possibly Ares?
I don't know. I mean, you certainly see Cersei and Joffrey and behaving similarly, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
could be genetic. And I've always wondered if Rhaegar might actually be Boniface. The captain appeared at her elbow. "Would that this Balerion could soar as her namesake did, your grace," he said in a bastard Balerion heavily flavored with accents of Pentos. "Then we should not need to row, nor tow, nor pray for wind." "Just so, Captain," she answered with a smile, pleased to have won the man over. Captain Grolio was an old Pentoshi like his master Illyrio Mapatis, and he had been nervous as a maiden about carrying 3 dragons on his ship. Half 100 buckets of seawater still hung from the gunwales in case of fires. At first, Grolio had wanted the dragons caged, and Dany had consented to put his fears at ease, but their misery was so palpable that she soon changed her mind and insisted they be freed. Even Captain Grolio was glad of that now. There had been one small fire, easily extinguished. Against that, Balerion suddenly seemed to have far fewer rats than she'd had before, when she sailed under the name Sedulian. And her crew, once as fearful as they were curious, had begun to take a queer, fierce pride in their dragons. Every man of them, from captain to cook's boy, loved to watch the 3 fly, though none so much as Dany. So I think Joso's prank could refer to Malco and Joso, folk singers from the 60s. And Summer Sun doesn't really require much analysis, but I don't know where the name Sedulian came from, and I haven't really found much speculation on it. Okay. Or at least any. I mean, maybe you can find speculation, but something plausible that really explains it, I haven't been able to find. Anyway, "They are my children," she told herself, and if the Magi spoke truly, they are the only children I ever like to have. Viserion's scales were the color of fresh cream, his horns, wing bones, and spinal crest a dark gold that flashed bright as metal in the sun. Rhaegal was made of the green of summer and the bronze of fall. They soared above the ships in wide circles, higher and higher, each trying to climb above the other. Dragons always prefer to attack from above, Dany had learned. Should either get between the other and the sun, he would fold his wings and dive screaming, and they would tumble from the sky, locked together in a tangled, scaly ball, jaws snapping and tails flashing. The first time they had done it, she feared that they meant to kill each other, but it was only sport. No sooner would they splash into the sea than they would break apart and rise again, shrieking and hissing, the salt water steaming off them as their wings clawed at the air. Drogon was aloft as well, though not in sight. He would be miles ahead or miles behind, hunting. So, in other words, I was kind of like these guys were just wrestling here.
Well, I mean, Drogon also reminds me of Ghost, being far away when he's away. I mean,
yeah, willing to go further away and so forth, which is how we find Ghost, right? He's kind of wandered off. He was always hungry, heard Drogon, hungry and growing fast. Another year, or perhaps two, and he may be large enough to ride. Then I shall have no need of ships to cross the great salt sea. So I've heard people claim that George had to make the dragons magically grow faster without the 5-year gap. But here in the beginning of Storm, he's telling us the largest dragon is a year from being rideable. And so having the largest dragon become rideable late in the 5th book, when he's a year away at the very beginning of the 3rd book, it doesn't sound like it required much of a retcon at all. I'm kind of shocked by this because I had heard people say this was a retcon and I believed it. But it really does feel like he's good reason to name a cat Balerion. Good rat catcher. Yeah, that's a good point.
Excellent.
So anyway, I was just kind of surprised by that. I bought into this logic that this had been a terrible retcon that he had to do, but
now,
he'd actually
when
kind of
did
set it
he
up.
realize that he had to drop the 5-year gap?
Well, not until after this book, because he wrote the first 3 books in a span of it was only like 4 years between the first book release and the 3rd book release. So, and then he tried with 5-year gap. That's right. So it's definitely after this book. So here at the beginning of this book, he's saying he's kind of set it up nicely. Anyway.
Okay.
But that time was not yet come. Rhaegal and Viserion were the size of small dogs. Drogon only a little larger, and any dog would have outweighed them. They were all wings and neck and tail lighter than they looked. And so Daenerys Targaryen must rely on wood and wind and canvas to bear her home. The wood and the canvas had served her well enough so far, but the fickle wind had turned traitor. For 6 days and 6 nights they had been becalmed. Now a 7th day had come, and still no breath of air to fill their sails. Fortunately, 2 of the ships that Magister Illyrio had sent after her were trading galleys with 200 oars apiece and crews of strong-armed oarsmen to row them. But the great cog Balerion was a song of a different key. Ponderous, broad-beamed sow of a ship with immense holds and huge sails, but helpless in a calm. Rhaegar and Meraxes had let out lines to tow her, but it made for painfully slow going. All 3 ships were crowded and heavily laden. I cannot see Drogon, said Sir Jorah Mormont as he joined her on the forecastle. Is he lost again? We are the ones who are lost, sir. Drogon has no taste for this wet creeping, no more than I do. Bolder than the other 2, her black dragon had been the first to try his wings above the water, the first to flutter from ship to ship, the first to lose himself in a passing cloud, and the first to kill. The flying fish no sooner broke the surface of the water than they were enveloped in a lance of flame, snatched up and swallowed. How big will he grow? Dany asked curiously. Do you know? In the 7 kingdoms, there are tales of dragons who grew so huge that they could pluck giant krakens from the seas. Dany laughed. That would be a wondrous sight to see. It's only a tale, Khaleesi, said her exile knight. They talk of wise old dragons living 1,000 years as well. Well, how long does a dragon live? She looked up as Viserion swooped low over the ship, his wings beating slowly and stirring the limp sails. Sir Jorah shrugged. A dragon's natural span of days is many times as long as a man's, or so the songs would have us believe. But the dragons the 7 kingdoms knew best were those of House Targaryen. They were bred for war, and in war they died. It's no easy thing to slay a dragon, but it can be done. The Squire Whitebeard, standing by the figurehead with one lean hand curled about his tall hardwood staff, turned toward them and said, Balerion the Black Dread was 200 years old when he died during the reign of Jaehaerys the Conciliator. He was so large he could swallow an Eric's whole. The dragon never stops growing, your grace, so long as he has food and freedom. His name was Arston, but strong Beowulf had named him Whitebeard for his pale whiskers, and most everyone called him that now. He was taller than Sir Jorah, though not so muscular. His eyes were pale blue, his long beard as white as snow and as fine as silk. Freedom? Asked Dany, curious. What do you mean? In King's Landing, your ancestors raised an immense domed castle for their dragons. The Dragon Pit, it is called. It still stands atop the Hill of Rhaenys, though all in ruins now. That was where the royal dragons dwelt in days of yore, and a cavernous dwelling it was, with iron doors so wide that 30 knights could ride through them abreast. Yet even so, it was noted that none of the pit dragons ever reached the size of their ancestors. The Maesters say it was because of the walls around them and the great dome above their heads. If walls could keep us small, peasants would all be tiny and kings as large as giants, said Sir Jorah. I've seen huge men born in hovels and dwarfs who dwelt in castles. Men are men, Whitebeard replied. Dragons are dragons. Sir Jorah snorted his disdain. How profound. The exile knight had no love for the old man. He made that plain from the first. What do you know of dragons, anyway? Little enough, that's true. Yet I served for a time in King's Landing in the days when King Aerys sat the Iron Throne and walked beneath the dragon skulls that looked down from the walls of his throne room. Viserys talked to those skulls, said Dany. The usurper took them down and hid them away. He could not bear them looking down on him upon his stolen throne. She beckoned Whitebeard closer. Did you ever meet my royal father? King Aerys II had died before his daughter was born. Saying King Aerys instead of her father is an interesting choice. See Triplet Targaryen's episode 4. I had that great honor, your grace. Did you find him good and gentle? Whitebeard did his best to hide his feelings, but they were there, plain on his face. His grace was often pleasant. Often? Dany smiled. But not always? He could be very harsh to those he thought his enemies. A wise man never makes an enemy of a king, said Dany. Did you know my brother Rhaegar as well? It was said that no man ever knew Prince Rhaegar truly. I had the privilege of seeing him in tourney, though, and often heard him play his harp with its silver strings. Sir Jorah snorted, along with 1,000 others at some harvest feast. Next you'll claim you squired for him. I make no such claim, sir. Miles Mooton was Prince Rhaegar's squire, and Richard Lonmouth after him. When they won their spurs, he knighted them himself, and they remained his close companions. Young Lord Cunnington was dear to the prince as well, but his oldest friend was Arthur Dane. So Radio Westeros thinks that Richard Lonmouth is Lem Lemoncloak. Toodles thinks Lem is Roderick Greyjoy, the older brother of Bronn, Balon, Euron, and Aeron. I mentioned a few episodes ago Toodles thinks Bronn is Meryn Greyjoy, which would make Tyrion calling Bronn lowborn scum deliciously ironic. The sword of the morning, said Dany, delighted. Viserys used to talk about his wondrous white blade. He said Sir Arthur was the only knight in the realm who was our brother's peer. Whitebeard bowed his head. It is not my place to question the words of Prince Viserys. King, Dany corrected. He was a king, though he never reigned. Viserys, the third of his name. What do you mean? His answer had not been one that she'd expected. Sir Jorah named Rhaegar the last dragon once. He had to have been a peerless warrior to be called that, surely. Dany considers Viserys to be the third of his name. She should consider her half-brother Aegon to be the sixth of his name, like Louis XVII or Napoleon II. See Triplet Targaryen's episode 3. Your Grace, said Whitebeard, the Prince of Dragonstone was a most puissant warrior, but... Go on, she urged. You may speak freely to me. As you command. The old man leaned upon his hardwood staff, his brow furrowed. A warrior without peer. Those are fine words, your grace. But words win no battles. Late but here, says Charles. Good to have you here, Charles. Swords win battles, Sir Jorah said bluntly, and Prince Rhaegar knew how to use one. He did, sir, but I have seen 100 tournaments and more wars than I would wish. And however strong or fast or skilled a knight may be, there are others who can match him. A man will win one tourney and fall quickly in the next. A slick spot in the grass may mean defeat, or what you ate for supper the night before. A change in the wind may bring the gift of victory. He glanced at Sir Jorah. Or a lady's favor nodded round an arm. Mormont's face darkened. Be careful what you say, old man. Arsene had seen Sir Jorah fight at Lannisport, Dany knew. In the tourney, Mormont had won with a lady's favor nodded around his arm. He'd won the lady, too, Vanessa of House Hightower, his second wife, highborn and beautiful. She had ruined him and abandoned him, and the memory of her was bitter to him now. Be gentle, my knight, she put a hand on Jorah's arm. Arstan had no wish to give offense, I'm certain. I'm not. As you say, Khaleesi, Sir Jorah's voice was grudging. Then he turned back to the squire. I know little of Rhaegar, only the tales Viserys told, and he was a little boy when our brother died. What was he truly like? The old man considered a moment. Able, that above all. Determined, deliberate, dutiful, single-minded. There's a tale told of him, but doubtless Sir Jorah knows it as well. I would hear it from you. As you wish, said Whitebeard. As a young boy, the Prince of Dragonstone was bookish to a fault. He was reading so early that men said Queen Rhaella must have swallowed some books in a candle whilst he was in her womb. Rhaegar took no interest in the play of other children. The maesters were awed by his wits, but his father's knights would jest sourly that Baelor the Blessed had been born again. Until one day, Prince Rhaegar found something in his scrolls that changed him. No one knows what it might have been, only that the boy suddenly appeared early one morning in the yard as the knights were donning their steel. He walked up to Sir Willem Darry, the master-at-arms, and said, I will require sword and armor. It seems I must be a warrior. Did he see something in the scrolls, or did he, or the ghost of Highheart, have a dream? See Gray Areas, the mysterious life of Rhaegar Targaryen. One of my favorite videos.
Okay.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
In fact, I tweeted a link to it to you. And he was, said Dany, delighted. He was indeed, Whitebeard bowed. My pardons, your grace. We speak of warriors, and I see that strong Belwas has arisen. I must attend him. Dany glanced aft. The eunuch was climbing through the hold amidships, nimble for all his size. Belwas was squat but broad, a good 15 stone of fat and muscle, his great brown gut crisscrossed by faded white scars. He wore baggy pants, a yellow silk belly band, and an absurdly tiny leather vest dotted with iron studs. Strong Belwas is hungry, he roared at everyone and no one in particular. Strong Belwas will eat now. Turning, he spied Arstan around the forecastle. Whitebeard, you will bring food for strong Belwas. You may go, Dany told the squire. He bowed again and moved off to tend the needs of the man he served. So Jorah watched with a frown on his blunt, honest face. Mormont was big and burly, strong of jaw and thick of shoulder. Not a handsome man by any means, but as true a friend as Dany had ever known. You would be wise to take that old man's words well salted, he told her when Whitebeard was out of earshot. An honest face on a true friend. Wait a few chapters, Dany. A queen must listen to all, she reminded him. The highborn and the low, the strong and the weak, the noble and the banal. One voice may speak you false, but in many there is always truth to be found. She'd read that in a book. Hear my voice then, your grace, the exile said. This Arstan Whitebeard is playing you false. He's too old to be a squire, and too well spoken to be serving that oaf of a eunuch. You can tell someone what someone is by their accent, according to Pip.
There you go.
That does seem queer, Dany had to admit. Strong Belwas was an ex-slave, bred and trained in the fighting pits of Marine. Magister Lero had sent him to guard her, or so Belwas claimed. And it was true that she needed guarding. The usurper on his Iron Throne had offered land and lordship to any man who killed her. One attempt had been made already with a cup of poisoned wine. The closer she came to Westeros, the more likely another attack became. Back in Karth, the warlock Pyat Pri had sent a sorrowful man after her to avenge the Undying she'd burned in their house of dust. Warlocks never forgot a wrong, it was said, and the sorrowful man never failed to kill. Most of the Dothraki would be against her as well. Khal Drogo's Khos led Khalasars of their own now, and none of them would hesitate to attack her own little band on sight, to slay and slave her people and drag Dany herself back to Bastel Rock to take her proper place among the withered crones of the Dosh Khaleen. She hoped that Xaro's own Daxos was not an enemy, but the Carthene merchant had coveted her dragons. And there was Quaitha the Shadow, that strange woman in the red lacquer mask with all her cryptic counsel. Was she an enemy too, or only a dangerous friend? Dany could not say. I've heard a theory that Xaro may have actually sent the sorrowful man. Anyway, because she's so certain that it was Pyat Pri, and our characters are often wrong.
Yeah.
Sir Jorah saved me from the poisoner, and Arstan Whitebeard from the Manticore. Perhaps strong Belwas will save me from the next. He was huge enough, with arms like small trees and a great curved arak so sharp he might have shaved with it, in the unlikely event of hair sprouting on those smooth brown cheeks. Yet he was childlike as well. As a protector, he leaves much to be desired. Thankfully, I have Sir Jorah and my blood riders. And my dragons, never forget. In time, the dragons would be her most formidable guardians, just as they had been for Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters 300 years ago. Just now, though, they brought her more danger than protection. In all the world, there were but 3 living dragons, and those were hers. They were a wonder and a terror and beyond price. Of course, our characters are often wrong, so maybe there are more than 3 dragons.
Well, I mean, we do have Bran's dream, and there were dragons that stirred beneath
Ashai.
Yeah.
Yep. She was pondering her next. Well, and then arguably the interpretation that summer is actually not seeing clouds that resemble dragons, but actually seeing a dragon, right?
Right.
She was pondering her next words when she felt a cool breath on the back of her neck, and a loose strand of her silver gold hair stirred against her brow. Above, the canvas creaked and moved, and suddenly a great cry went up from all over Balerion. "Wind!" the sailor shouted. "The wind returns! The wind!" Hopefully someday we'll have similar joy from winds.
It's also funny that she was just mentioning Quaithe, and now she has good winds.
Mm. Then I looked up to where the great cog sails rippled and bellowed as the lines thrummed and tightened and sang the sweet song they had missed so for 6 long days. Captain Grillio rushed aft, shouting commands. The Bentoshi were scrambling up the masts, those that were not cheering. Even strong Belwas let out a great bellow and did a little dance. "The gods are good," Dany said. "You see, Jorah? We are on our way once more." "Yes," he said, "but to what, my queen?" All day the wind blew steady from the east at first, and then in wild gusts. The sun set in a blaze of red. "I'm still half a world from Westeros," Dany reminded herself, "but every hour brings me closer." She tried to imagine what it would feel like when she first caught sight of the land she was born to rule. "It will be as fair a shore as I have ever seen, I know it. How could it be otherwise?" But later that night, as Balerion plunged onward through the dark, and Dany sat cross-legged on her bunk in the captain's cabin, feeding her dragons. Even upon the sea, Grillio had said so graciously, queens take precedence over captains. A sharp knock came upon the door. Aerie had been sleeping at the foot of her bunk. It was too narrow for 3, and tonight was Jiqui's turn to share the soft feather bed with her Khaleesi. But the handmaid roused the knock and went to the door. Dany pulled up a coverlet and tucked it under her arms. She was naked and had not expected a caller at this hour. "Come," she said when she saw Sir Jorah standing without beneath the swaying lantern. The exile knight ducked his head as he entered. "Your Grace, I'm sorry to disturb your sleep." "I was not sleeping, sir. Come and watch." She took a chunk of salt pork out of the bowl in her lap and held it up for her dragons to see. All 3 of them eyed it hungrily. Rhaegal spread green wings and stirred the air, and Viserion's neck swayed back and forth like a long, pale snake's as he followed the movement of her hand. "Drogon," Dany said softly. "Dracarys," and she tossed the pork in the air. Drogon moved quicker than a striking cobra. Flame roared from his mouth, orange and scarlet and black, searing the meat before it began to fall. As his sharp black teeth snapped shut around it, Rhaegal's head darted close, as if to steal the prize from his brother's jaws. But Drogon swallowed and screamed, and the smaller green dragon could only hiss in frustration. "Stop that, Rhaegal," Dany said in annoyance, giving his head a swat. "You had the last one. I'll have no greedy dragons." She smiled at Sir Jorah. "I won't need to char their meat over a brazier any longer." "So I see. Dracarys?" All 3 dragons turned their heads at the sound of that word, and Viserion let loose with a blast of pale gold flame that made Sir Jorah take a hasty step backward. Dany giggled. "Be careful with that word, sir, or they're like to singe your beard off. It means dragonfire in High Valyrian. I wanted to choose a command that no one was like to utter by chance." Mormont nodded. "Your Grace," he said, "I wonder if I might have a few private words." "Of course. Aerie, leave us for a bit." She put a hand on Jiqui's bare shoulder and shook the other handmaid awake. "You as well, sweetling. Sir Jorah needs to talk to me." "Yes, Khaleesi." Jiqui tumbled from the bunk, naked and yawning. Her thick black hair tumbled about her head. She dressed quickly and left with Aerie, closing the door behind them. Dany gave the dragons the rest of the salt pork to squabble over and patted the bed beside her. "Sit, good sir, and tell me what is troubling you." "3 things," Sir Jorah said. Sir Jorah sat. Strong Belwas, this Arstan Whitebeard, and Illyrio Mopatis who sent them. Again, Dany pulled the coverlet higher and tugged one end over her shoulder. "And why is that?" "The warlocks in Karth told you that you would be betrayed 3 times, the exile knight reminded her, as Viserion and Rhaegal began to snap and claw at each other. Once for blood, and once for gold, and once for love, Dany was not like to forget. Mary Mosdure was the first, which means 2 traitors yet remain, and now these 2 appear. I find that troubling, yes. Never forget, Robert offered a lordship to the man who slays you. Of course, I'm not really convinced that Mary Mosdure betrayed her, but anyway.
No, I don't think so either.
As Lady Thistle has pointed out, the conversation started with, is there a spell? There is. I'll give you any number of horses that you want. Horses don't work. It's got to be a human life. Like, that's the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
and so what's the betrayal? Like she made the deal of, I will give up a human life and you will make Drogon worse than dead, or sorry, Drogo worse than dead, right? She specifically tells her he's going to be worse than dead, right? So death will be cleaner than what I'm going to do to him. He's going to be worse than dead, right? And so she gives him Drogo worse than dead, as she promised she would, sacrifices a human life as she promised she would, and then Dany turns around and burns her to birth the dragons. So I always find it funny when LML claims that there's not going to be this blood sacrifice to save the world, because like he claims that Dany is not the villain, and he goes, George is very consistent. If you would do that, then you're the villain. And Dany did it twice in the first book. She made the decision to sacrifice an innocent human life twice in the first book, and yet he's like, anyway, all right, moving on. Dany leaned forward. I think he does. I think he has some great analysis. I'm friendly with him. I'm not an LML hater. I just find that particular belief. George isn't about cut and dry. If somebody does this, it means they're bad. Right? That's not him. His characters are morally gray. They're supposed to be morally gray. Dany's decision to do that twice is supposed to be morally gray. I mean, anyway, it doesn't mean that she's I think she arguably is kind of becoming a villain, but it doesn't mean that she's that she has to be a villain. And he doesn't actually, and clearly LML doesn't believe that it means that she has to become a villain. So anyway, Dany leaned forward and yanked Viserion's tail to pull him off his green brother. Her blanket fell away from her chest as she moved. She grabbed it hastily and covered herself again. The usurper is dead, she said. But his son rules in his place. Ser Jorah lifted his gaze and his dark eyes met her own. The dutiful son pays his father's debts, even blood debts. Oh, did I skip over which means 2 traitors yet remain, and now these 2 appear. I find that troubling. Yes, never forget Robert offered lordship to the man who slays you. Did I skip over that? Well, anyway, we said it now. This boy Joffrey might want me dead if he recalls that I'm alive. What is that to do with Belwas and Arstan Whitebeard? The old man does not even wear a sword. You've seen that. Aye, and I've seen how deftly he handles that staff of his. Recall how he killed that manticore in Karth? Might as easily have been your throat he crushed. Might have been, but was not, she pointed out. It was a stinging manticore meant to slay me. He saved my life. Khaleesi, has it occurred to you that Whitebeard and Belwas might have been in league with the assassin? Might all have been a ploy to win your trust. Her sudden laughter made Drogon hiss and sent Viserion flapping to his perch above the porthole. The ploy worked well. The exiled knight did not return her smile. These are Illyrio's ships, Illyrio's captains, Illyrio's sailors, and strong Belwas and Arstan are his men as well, not yours. Magister Illyrio has protected me in the past. Strong Belwas says that he wept when he heard my brother was dead. Yes, said Mormont, but did he weep for Viserys or for the plans he had made with him? His plans need not change. Magister Illyrio is a friend to House Targaryen and wealthy. He was not born wealthy. In the world as I have seen it, no man grows rich by kindness. The warlock said the second treason would be for gold. What does Illyrio Mopatis love more than gold? His skin. Across the cabin, Drogon stirred restlessly, steam rising from his snout. Mary Mosdore betrayed me. I burned her for it. Mary Mosdore was in your power, and Pentos you shall be in Illyrio's power. It is not the same. I know the Magister as well as you. He's a devious man and clever. I need clever men about me if I'm to win the Iron Throne. Ser Jorah snorted. That wine seller who tried to poison you was a clever man as well. Clever men hatch ambitious schemes. Dany drew her legs up beneath the blanket. You will protect me, you and my blood riders. 4 men? Khaleesi, you believe you know Illyrio Mopatis very well. Yet you insist on surrounding yourself with men you do not know, like this puffed-up eunuch and the world's oldest squire. Take a lesson from Piat Pri and Zarozo and Daxos. He means well, Dany reminded herself. He does all he does for love. It seems to me that a queen who trusts no one is as foolish as a queen who trusts everyone. Every man I take into my service is a risk. I understand that. But how am I to win the Seven Kingdoms without such risks? Am I to conquer Westeros with one exile knight and 3 Dothraki blood riders? So this discussion reminds me of John Cunnington and Aegon, right? And Aegon says, "I will remember," when John Cunnington tells him that make men prove themselves to you, and then you can trust them. Yeah. But it also reminds me of Ned. Like Ned had to trust somebody, and the only person that he really put trust in was the person his wife assured him was the person he should trust. Yeah. And it led to his downfall. And yet everybody's like, "Oh, Ned is so stupid." I'm like, you had to trust somebody. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean. And young Robert, or even old Robert, tend to trust everybody, even defeated enemies that all of a sudden are drinking with him, and now his friends.
Right. Like he knew that he would be a lousy king, so he tried to pick hands of the king that would be good at ruling the kingdom. The problem was he picked the husbands of the Tully sisters, who then convinced them to trust Littlefinger, who then, in the case of the first, bankrupted the realm through embezzlement, and in the case of the second, screwed him over and killed him. So,
yeah.
His jaw set stubbornly. Your path is dangerous. I will not deny that. But if you blindly trust in every liar and schemer who crosses it, you will end as your brothers did. His obstinacy made her angry. Ned trusted Cat, exactly. And Littlefinger is just Littlefinger. Yep. His jaw set stubbornly. Your path is dangerous. I will not deny that. But if you blindly trust every liar and schemer who crosses it, you will end as his brothers. His obstinacy made her angry. He treats me like some child. Strong Belwas could not scheme his way to breakfast. And what lies has Urshan Whitebeard told me? He's not what he pretends to be. He speaks to you more boldly than any squire would dare. He spoke frankly at my command. He knew my brother. A great many men knew your brother, your grace. In Westeros, the Lord Commander of the King's Guard sits on the small council and serves the king with his wits as well as his steel. If I am the first of your Queen's Guard, I pray you, hear me out. I have a plan to put to you. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard, you say? We see what you did there, George. What plan? Tell me. Illyrio Mopatis wants you back in Pentos under his roof. Very well, go to him, but in your own time and not alone. Let us see how loyal and obedient these new subjects of yours truly are. Command Grolio to change course for Slaver's Bay. Dany was not certain she liked the sound of that at all. Everything she'd ever heard of the flesh marks in the great slave cities of Yunkai, Meereen, and Astapor was dire and frightening. What is there for me in Slaver's Bay? An army, said Ser Jorah. If strong Belwas is so much to your liking, you can buy hundreds more like him out of the fighting pits of Meereen. There's Astapor I'd set my sails for, and Astapor you can buy unsullied. Let me mute this and go yell at the dogs for a minute.
Okay. I know you're late to the game there, Charles, but I showed everybody the banner and told them that I thanked you and let you know that a ordinary nail will not do to hold that fine work up. So I will be headed to Home Depot this weekend and pick out a very gorgeous hook to hold that up.
Hey, sorry about that. But okay. I guess that worked out pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
I could hear you. Change course for Slaver's Bay. What is there for me in Slaver's Bay? Yep, we did that. An army, said Ser Jorah. Oh, yeah, we did that to part two. If strong bells is so much liking, I think I read this whole. I said Unsullied. That's right what I said.
Yeah,
I just said Unsullied. Yeah. The slaves in the spiked bronze hats? Dany has seen Unsullied guards in the free cities posted at the gates of magisters, archons, and dynasts. Why should I want Unsullied? They don't even ride horses, and most of them are fat. Thank you. I'm really glad you like it. Oh yeah, I was impressed, Charles.
Like is not the word. Love is the word.
The Unsullied you may have seen in Pentos and Mirror were household guards. That's soft service, and eunuchs tend to plumpness in any case. Food is the only vice allowed them. To judge all Unsullied by a few old household slaves is like judging all squires by Urshan Whitebeard, your grace. Do you know the tale of the 3,000 of Qohor? No, the coverlet slipped off Dany's shoulder and she tugged it back into place. It was 400 years ago or more when the Dothraki first rode out of the east, sacking and burning every town and city in their path. The Cal who led them was named Temo. His Khalasar was not so big as Drogo's, but it was big enough. 50,000 at the least. Half of them braided warriors with bells ringing in their hair. The Cohoric knew he was coming. They strengthened their walls, doubled the size of their own guard, and hired 2 free companies besides, the Bright Banners and the Second Sons. And almost as an afterthought, they sent a man to Astapor to buy 3,000 Unsullied. It's a long march back to Qohor, however, and as they approached, they saw the smoke and dust and heard the distant din of battle. By the time the Unsullied reached the city, the sun had set. Crows and wolves were feasting beneath the walls of what remained of the Cohoric heavy horse. The Bright Banners and Second Sons had fled, as sellswords are wont to do in the face of hopeless odds. With dark falling, the Dothraki had retired to their own camps to drink and dance and feast, but none doubted that they would return on the morrow to smash the city gates, storm the walls, and rape, loot, and slave as they pleased. When dawn broke and Temo and his blood riders led their Khalasar out of the camp, they found 3,000 Unsullied drawn up before the gates with a black goat standard flying over their heads. So small a force could easily have been flanked, but you know Dothraki. These were men on foot, and men on foot are fit only to be ridden down. The Dothraki charged. The Unsullied locked their shields, lowered their spears, and stood firm. Against 20,000 screamers with bells in their hair, they stood firm. 18 times the Dothraki charged and broke themselves in those shields and spears like waves on a rocky shore. Thrice Temo sent his archers wheeling past, and arrows felt like rain upon the 3,000, but the Unsullied merely lifted their shields above their heads until the squall had passed. In the end, only 600 of them remained, but more than 12,000 Dothraki lay dead upon that field, including Cal Temo, his blood riders, his co's, and all his sons. On the morning of the 4th day, that new Cal had led the survivors past the city gates in a stately procession. One by one, each man cut off his braid and threw it down before the feet of the 3,000. Since that day, the city guard of Qohor has been made up solely of Unsullied, every one of whom carries a tall spear from which hangs a braid of human hair. That is what you will find in Astapor, your grace. Put ashore there and continue on to Pentos overland. It will take longer, yes. When you break bread with Master Illyrio, you will have 1,000 swords behind you, not just 4. There is wisdom in this, yes, Dany thought, but how am I to buy 1,000 slave soldiers? All I have of value is the crown the Tourmaline Brotherhood gave me. Dragons will be as great a wonder in Astapor as they were in Karth. It may be that the slavers will shower you with gifts as the Karthine did. If not, these ships carry more than your Dothraki and their horses. They took on trade goods at Karth. I've been through the holds and seen for myself. Bolts of silk and bales of tiger skin, amber and jade carvings, saffron, myrrh. Slaves are cheap, your grace. Tiger skins are costly. Those are Illyrio's tiger skins, she objected. And Illyrio is a friend to House Targaryen. All the more reason not to steal his goods. What use are wealthy friends if they will not put their wealth at your disposal, my queen? Master Illyrio would deny you he is only Zaranzo and Daxos with 4 chins, and if he is sincere in his devotion to your cause, he would not begrudge you 3 shiploads of trade goods. What better use for his tiger skins than to buy you the beginnings of an army? That's true. Dany felt a rising excitement. There will be dangers on such a long march. There are dangers at sea as well. Corsairs and pirates hunt the southern route, and north of Valyria, the smoking sea is demon-haunted. The next storm could sink or scatter us. A cracking could pull us under. We might find ourselves becalmed again and die of thirst as we wait for the wind to rise. March will have different dangers, my queen, but none greater. What if Captain Grolio refuses to change course, though? And Arston, Strong Belwas, what will they do? So Jorah stood. Perhaps it's time you found that out. Yes, she decided. I'll do it. Dany threw back the coverlet and hopped from the bunk. I'll see the captain at once. Command him to set course for Astapor. She bent over her chest, threw open the lid, and seized the first garment to hand, a pair of loose sand-silk trousers. Hand me my medallion belt, she commanded Jorah as she pulled the sand-silk up over her hips. And my vest, she started to say, turning. Jorah slid his arms around her. Oh, was all Dany had time to say as he pulled her close and pressed his lips down on hers. He smelled of sweat and salt and leather, and the iron studs of his jerkin dug into her naked breasts as he crushed her hard against him. One hand held her by the shoulder while the other slid down her spine to the small of her back. Her mouth opened for his tongue, though she never told it to. His beard is scratchy, she thought, but his mouth is sweet. The Dothraki wore no beards, only long mustaches, and only Khal Drogo had ever kissed her before. He should not be doing this. I'm his queen, not his woman. Her mouth opened for his tongue, though she never told it to. I don't know how this helps anyone, but it sounds like potential Brantam leaping.
little bit.
It was a long kiss, though how long Dany could not have said. When it ended, Sir Jorah let go of her, and she took a quick step backwards. You should not have. I should not have waited so long, he finished for her. I should have kissed you in Karth, in Base Teluro. I should have kissed you in the Red Waste every night and every day. You were made to be kissed, often and well. His eyes were on her breasts. Dany covered them with her hands before her nipples could betray her. That was not fitting. I'm your queen. My queen, he said, and the bravest, sweetest, and most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Daenerys, your grace. Your grace, he conceded. The dragon has 3 heads, remember? You've wondered at that ever since you heard it from the warlocks in the House of Dust. Well, here's your meaning. Balerion, Meraxes, and Vhagar, written by Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya, the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. 3 dragons and 3 riders. Yes, said Dany, but my brothers are dead. Your brother and sister live. We just met her. See Triplet Targaryens, episode 7. Rhaenys and Visenya were Aegon's wives as well as his sisters. You have no brothers, but you can take husbands. And I tell you truly, Daenerys, there is no man in all the world who will ever be half so true to you as me. The true friend with the honest face. But seriously, marriage is just a social construct. Dany has the truth of it. She needs Aegon and his sisters. Up next, Storm 9, Bran 1. I want to fly. Please take me to the Crow.
Creepy Sir Jorah.
Yep, Jorah's doing his creeping, but like I said, this is really where Dany says, the 3 heads should be my siblings, right? Which should be Aegon and his sisters. Yes, it's marriage is. I mean, the whole point of bastards versus trueborn, and who do you love, and is Jaime really the rightful son of Aerys since he's from who the king really wanted to marry versus. I mean, the whole concept of this is all about how that's all just a social construct, and the real truth of the 3 heads of the dragons, it's Aegon and his sisters.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Anyway.
Yeah. I get an icky feeling at the end of that chapter.
Yeah, but then it gives you that quote, and you're like,
yeah,
okay, this is like one of the biggest clues of what's really going on.
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
Says the Triplet Targaryen guy.
Well, I mean, regardless of whether the middle child born is Jon or Fagon, it doesn't matter. Whatever.
Right.
It's still Val, the male heir, and Dany.
Right. So. I firmly believe that George believes his books are ambiguous, that he leaves himself open, that he considers there to be multiple correct interpretations. So him telling you one interpretation is correct does not rule out the alternative interpretation. That he believes it's the correct. I mean, I really do think that I think it's kind of funny when I hear people say, for example, in Girls Gone Canon, they were like he says it's exactly like the Scarlet O'Hara thing, but it isn't. And I'm like, no, it is. No, it is. He says it is, and it is. He says it's exactly like that, and they're like, but it really isn't. And I'm like, but it really is.
George hardly ever gives any definite answers, and
no. I mean, he says things that are just off the cuff, where he's not really thinking about that. But that one he has said over and over again, and there's something else that he said that I could tell was deliberate. I can't think what it was now, but. When I have these profound thoughts of, this is one of the few things that he said where I'm sure he really meant it, kind of thing, because he says some things that are clearly, like, at the time he's asked them, he thinks they're true, but when you stop and look at it, they're clearly not. Like for example, he told History of Westeros, like within the past year or so, that any similarities between the history and the main story are like coincidental or something, and I'm like, no, that's clearly not true. No, I mean, even the whole concept right here is telling you it's not true, right? That is, anyway.
Yeah.
D&D got John's mother 100% correct. No questions asked. Take it to the bank.
Okay.
Yeah, they did, and it's still, you know, uh, and it's still the case that he could go a different direction in the books. Both are true. Pod's banned again. Yeah, and I don't know. He's not necessarily disagreeing with me either. Is the thing, right? And I know he seems to disagree with my belief that that killing Brienne was was an honorable act of helping a dying child rather than a monstrous act of a villain. Um, but I don't know that he's actually disagreeing with me with that statement. I think you could argue that he's saying exactly what I said. Anyway.
Yeah. All right, it's Friday, man. My wife just came in.
All right.
Yeah, I got nothing else today. I'm
Yeah, it's like you said, it's one of Jorah's creepiest moments, but it's also giving us kind of the whole key of telling us this is what it is. You know, everybody assumes it's Dany. In fact, she has another quote later where she says that somewhere in the world there are two men I can trust, and it's the same trap that the fandom falls into. They think this is about her finding two men who have Targaryen blood that can ride dragons and that she can trust. It's not. It's about Aegon and his sisters.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually they're gonna be like, oh, she's gonna find Fagon and then Jon, and then those are the two Targaryens.
Right.
It's, I mean, like I said, regardless of who the middle child born,
and even if those don't want to be in the riders, the three heads were supposed to be them.
Yeah, I agree. I
even
think
if we're still the ones of stealing a dragon.
Yeah, that's true. All right, but okay. It's Friday weekend. Everybody, please have fun. Be safe. Because you definitely want to be here Monday for brand one. This should be a very, very good chapter. And I'm sorry I'm off my game a little bit today. I had really rough sleep last night.
I thought it went fine. I appreciate the way you spoke up as I was gathering the dogs from outside.
That's all right.
That wound up being perfect with you catching Charles up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I told him I was going to give him a shout out. That was the first thing I did, show everybody the banner. But yeah, I'll be headed to Home Depot tomorrow to pick up some pine to do shelves in the kitchen and stuff. And then I'm definitely going to the home decor lighting section, just wherever I can find a hook that is beautiful enough to hold that thing up. But great. All right, like I said, man, I'm tired. Last night was rough.
Yeah, well, I can certainly relate. I've had plenty of sleepless nights, although I did all right last night.
Yeah. Again. All right. Well, we'll see everybody Monday. Y'all be good. Thank y'all for joining us. And y'all take care. Bye.
Too.
Bye, Richard.